Hello friends and welcome. I am Samantha of Krebs Bookkeeper Crafts, and if you're new here, I show you how I make things. Subscribe for more. I recently found out my grandpa watches my videos, so hi grandpa! Today I am showing you how to assemble the 7th clue in the Cotton Cuts Fall 2021 Puzzle Mystery Quilt Olympia. This is the 7th video in the Olympia series. If you missed the earlier videos, check out the playlist in the description down below. If you are not familiar with Cotton Cuts Puzzle Mystery Quilts, it is a 10-month-long monthly subscription box of pre-cut fabrics for making a mystery quilt. Each month's box contains all of the fabric you need cut to the shapes you need to assemble that month's clue. I am making the small Shaun colorway, which is made up of all of these beautiful Northcott shimmer fabrics. If you're making a different colorway, that's okay. Just make sure to match your fabrics using your key. So let's go ahead and open up the bundle for this month. It looks like we have lots of different fabrics to work with this month. We have a few small triangles of fabric H and fabric B, several squares in lots of different colors. We'll go through those in a second. We have 2 other sets of squares in, again, fabric H and fabric B. And for our other squares, we have fabric B, fabric H. This one is fabric E. We have fabric F, fabric D, and fabric A. We are going to start by working with our squares of A, E, and F. So we'll go ahead and set these aside for the moment. So we are going to be sewing these into 2 9 patches. Our 9 patches are laid out with a square of fabric A in each corner. Then we have fabric E in the middles of our sides. And then the 2 squares of fabric F will be the centers of our 2 9 patches. For me, that's a lot of blues, so there might be some seam ripping. I am going to go ahead and mesh both of these 9 patches together just like we did a couple weeks ago. Now that I have my squares sewn into rows, I'm going to go ahead and finger press the seams following the pressing directions. In our top and bottom rows, we'll be pressing our seams to our fabric A squares away from our center E fabrics. We're going to do that in both the top and the bottom rows. So we're going to press to the A fabric, the corners, away from the center fabric E. Like that, and like that. Now in the center, we're going to press our seams to the center fabric F square away from our fabric E squares. So just shift that seam to the center, and we're going to go ahead and finger press that, and do the same thing on this side. Just moving that seam to the center, set it down, double check the seam, you can feel it underneath there, and go ahead and finger press. Our seams are now pressed in opposite directions, which means we can get perfect points by, helps if you center it in frame, perfect points by seam nesting. Now that my 9 patches are sewn together, it is time to give them a good press with my iron. Our directions want us to press these long seams away from the center. So we're going to press this one up here to the top. I'm going to go ahead and finger press that for the moment so that I can hit it with the iron in a second. And then this bottom one here, we're going to press down. Our 9 patches are pressed, so we're going to set these aside for a moment and work with almost all of our remaining square pieces. We're going to set 2 of our B square fabrics aside for later, which should leave us with 2 squares each of fabrics B, H, and D. We're going to go ahead and sew these together in 2 rows with fabric H on the left side, fabric B in the middle, and fabric D on the right side. We are going to go ahead and press the seams in these strips to the center B fabric. So let's grab our 9 patches from earlier. We're going to sew this row of squares to the side of our 9 patch. Now we pressed our seams to the middle of this row, and we pressed our last 2 seams on our 9 patch to the outside. So you can see there. All right, folks. This is the fatal moment where I realized I mixed up 2 of my fabrics. So if you look at your directions, it says that this square should be fabric D, and I've been calling it fabric D. Friends, this is not fabric D. This is fabric F. I called that fabric F. Friends, that is fabric D. Time to seam rip. So I guess we're going to do a quick little primer on seam ripping because I don't have any extra of this fabric. I was given exactly as much as I need to put this block together. So if I use an actual seam ripper and use the fast method, which is where you just take and slide your seam ripper down this seam, I could possibly rip or cut one of these 2 fabrics, and I do not have extra squares. So instead, I'm going to take the slow, very picky route, and I'm going to pick out the stitches. So I use just a stiletto. You can use a pin. I hope you guys have sewing pins. If you don't, something pointy. Toothpick would work too. You're just looking for one of the seams. I usually do 2 stitches. Just looking to catch one of the stitches. I'll go in 2 stitches and then I'll pull it. And then I'll go in 2 stitches. 2 or 3 stitches. It is really hard to do this while watching through a camera instead of what I'm actually doing. So that's it. You can also loosen by pulling your thread, and you'll see the loop came up. Then you can slide this out of the way and pop it like that. These seams are not terribly long, so I'm just going to do it the tedious way. Yes, it is going to take longer, but I know that my fabrics are not going to get distorted and they're not going to get ripped. So this is how you seam rip without damaging your fabrics. I told y'all this was going to happen at some point. Once you get far enough that you get a bit of a tail, you can try pulling and seeing if you can pull out the rest of the seam. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And that time, I could. So that's one ripped. 4 more to go. Witness the carnage. Now let's go sew this together right. So now that we've fixed that, we have our 9 patch here. In our orientation, where we have the long seams running side to side. And then we have our row here with our fabric D square on the bottom and our fabric H square on the top. We're going to sew it to the left side of our 9 patch, and we are going to nest these seams right here. We're going to go ahead and press these seams here to our 9 patch. Now that those are sewn together, we are going to turn our attention to the larger B and H triangles. We are going to sew these into BH pairs with our B triangles. Let's double check our key. Our B triangles in the upper left hand corner with their nose pointing down, and our H triangles in the lower right hand corner with their nose pointing up. We're going to go ahead and press both of these to our B triangles. So now that we have these pressed, we will grab the 2 smaller triangles and we will take our H triangles and we're going to put them down here on the lower left hand corner and our B triangles up here on the upper right. We are going to press both of these seams to the corner triangles. We're getting very close now. We're going to grab these 2 remaining squares of our fabric B. Just double check that because it'd be a shame if I had to rip something out now. So we're going to take these 2 squares and we are going to sew it next to this fabric H corner. We're going to go ahead and press both of these to our fabric B squares. And we're on the last step. We are going to take this strip and we are going to sew it to the bottom of our 9 patch unit with the strip on the side. We're going to keep our fabric H square in the upper left hand corner. Here we have our fabric B square that we sewed on the bottom. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to nest these 2 seams. So remember, we pressed this seam towards the 9 patch and we pressed this seam towards this B square. So these 2 are going to nest perfectly to give us some nice corners. So one other thing to line up that I forgot to mention before I came over here is we want to line up the tip of this point with this seam right here. And to do that, we're going to take our pin and we're going to stab it right through the bottom of the X here. So it is coming out right through, I don't know if you can see that well. It's coming out right through the tip of the triangle there. So then we are going to kind of sort of line up the top edge of this piece with the edge of this piece, like you normally would when you are sewing. And we are going to try to poke the needle in through the seam, right next to the seam. So we are going through, the needle is sitting perpendicular mostly to the fabric, so I don't have any weird warble. And then we're just going to pin that in place. So now we've lined that up. Now when we sew, I'm going to sew with this side facing up because I'm going to sew right across the center of this X here. And then also when I get over here, I want to make sure that the point of this triangle, here I will go ahead and unpin that, the point of this triangle is going to hit right at this seam. Now I know it's going to line up on the edge of this seam because of my seam nesting, but I could, if I don't hit this cross right here, well technically I want to be on this side of the cross because some of that fabric's going to be taken up in the fold. But if I don't hit that quite right, I could end up hitting it over here and then my point is really far away. Or I could end up sewing over that point and burying my point in the seam. I don't want to do either of those. So I am going to sew with this side facing up, and when I get here, my seam allowance for the most part looks like it's going to line up perfectly, but if it didn't, I would still aim for this spot right here. I'm going to sew right there. And I'm going to go ahead and pin that in place so it doesn't shift on me while I fold. So just showing you one more time how I'm going to line this stuff up. I'm going to nest this seam allowance here, lock it in place, and pin it. And then I am going to poke my pin through the nose of my triangle here. Stab it through the other side about 1/4 inch below, make sure things line up, and weave it through. So I'm also going to give you guys a nice close-up of the sewing so that we can see when I try to hit this point here. So just going to show you guys, you'll see my seam allowance is not the most consistent seam allowance I've ever sewn in my life, but we're not aiming for a perfect seam allowance, we're aiming for perfect points. And there is plenty of fabric here to prevent my seam allowances from unraveling. So if we open that up, that's pretty darn good. And that one's pretty darn good as well. Let's check the other one. Oh man, that one's even better than the other one. And that point got a little shifty on me. Sometimes that happens. And that is okay because from all the way over there, you can't tell. Done is better than perfect. So let's go ahead and go press these. Our directions are telling us we want to go ahead and press this seam up towards our 9 patch. So I'm going to flip it over, fold this guy back. And that is it. It is time to label these units and add them to our collection. This is clue number 7, so I am labeling them 7. So those are the instructions for month 7 of the fall 2021 Puzzle Quilt Mystery Quilt Olympia from Cotton Cuts. Thank you to Cotton Cuts for providing the pre-cut fabric for this tutorial. If you want any more information about the Cotton Cuts Puzzle Mystery Quilt, check out the links in the description down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to do the YouTube-y things, thumbs up and subscribe. I will see you next month for the clue number 8. 2 more clues left before our final reveal. Thank you for hanging out with me during the series so far, and I will catch you later.